Okay, so this is the unboxing of the Quickjacks. We bought these at SEMA in Las Vegas this year, and they shipped them up to the house for free. My son and I have just moved these over to the clean side of the shop, and we're unboxing right now. Just took the lids off both boxes. Looks like the Quickjacks are just contained in a little bit of styrofoam and an instruction book, so we're going to pull them out of the box and see what they look like. Okay, so this is the model BL-7000SLX Quickjack. And again, we're just finishing the unboxing portion. As you can see, it's just a single unit in each box. The shipping came in two large boxes like this, and then there's two smaller boxes. I assume that's for the hydraulic portion and the electronic portion. So once we get them completely unboxed, or at least the two jack stands completely unboxed, then we'll look into the other boxes. Okay, so what we realized when we took the first one out of the box is there is a set of wheels, albeit very small wheels, on one side of the stand. Let's see if I can get a better shot of this. Okay, there's the small wheels. These things are made to be picked up from the opposite end of the stand over here. I assume by this portion of the handle. My son said when he was lifting it, though, that you need to keep your fingers out from underneath it, because when you lay this thing down, obviously it'll pinch pretty hard. These things are supposed to weigh about 95 to 100 pounds each. And the claim to fame, I guess, is the ability to pick it up by this end and then just wheel it into place where you want it. We'll find that out here real shortly. We just wanted to finish unboxing this one. The other thing is this styrofoam in the box is quite tricky if you have unboxed it from this side. It gets stuck underneath here, so a two-person lift and maybe a third person even to knock that styrofoam off. Other than that. Okay, so oddly enough, it shows a guy standing on the box with the two jacks in his hand. He's walking with them. This is pretty much what we figure out impossible to do unless somebody else puts them in your hand for you, because what we figured out as we were taking these out of the box is that handle sits flush on the ground. So literally there is no way to get your hand up underneath that to use it as a handle without it being lifted first. So what my son was doing was lifting here and then putting the other hand in there to grab it. To do that with both of them with no assistance, yeah, that's not going to happen. They do move around pretty good. Once you get them up in the air, the wheels do work just fine, and it looks like they roll around just fine. So we're going to pull the other two boxes out and see what's there. All right, boxes 3 and 4. There's one large box that's going to have all the hydraulics and electronics in it. And then the smaller box came in. And this is just, looks like the standard, no, this is the, yeah, standard and maybe the SUV lift option that I purchased. This may just be the SUV lift option, I'm not sure. So it may only be 3 boxes. Maybe this big box has the standards in it.
Box 3 of 3.
Yeah, that's what that is. Okay, so the smaller box, I ordered the SUV lift companion pieces. This allows you to get the bigger vehicles up on this stand. And then this bigger box, if you want to grab that knife there, let's open this up for the public and see what we have here. Alrighty then. More boxes. How about that? And why wouldn't you put more boxes in the box? Okay, so it looks like in the bigger box is going to be our control module. They call it a control pendant, I think, in the directions. And then in the smaller box, yeah, that's where they are. That's the standard rubber pieces for your lift, and then the hydraulic hoses. And then this here is going to be the hydraulic portion. So let's get this out of the box. Okay, so we've unboxed the control unit with the little control pendant here. Looks like, oh, there we go. Up and down controller. Little hydraulic tank right here. Looks like with a breather in it. Now it shows that you add fluid to this thing and they didn't ship any with it. So I'm gonna look in there in a little while, see if there's anything in there. If there's not, you know, obviously it's something you can buy. There's control solenoids, probably a raise and a lower solenoid, and there's your little control pump. So this is the unit. It's not too terribly heavy. Then in the same box, there's a couple of positioning handles. We'll figure out how those work in a minute. Hydraulic hoses, and then all the hydraulic fittings that are going to be required to put this thing together. These are things we'll have to work out in a minute, but there's your unboxing. With the exception of that smaller box, like I said, there was some components in there. So you get your blocks, you get a set of short blocks, 4 short blocks, and then you get 4 of the taller blocks. And again, I bought the SUV kit as well. And here's the manual for this particular, looks like it'll do all models. So we're gonna get into it here in a minute. Okay, so part of the unboxing reveals a package containing what looks like 2 elbows, 2 nipple fittings, 4 male fittings, and 4 female quick disconnect fittings. Additionally, there's extra feet for the power control unit, 2 extra rollers in case, I guess, if your rollers get crushed or mangled, whatever, and a roll of thread seal tape. So we're going to take this package apart here. Additionally, come over here, there is enough hydraulic hose to go from the power control unit to both of the lift units. So we're going to assemble this, and what I'll do is assemble one, and then instead of continuing the video while I assemble, I'll just do that off camera, and then we'll come back when that's done. We've assembled, the directions call to assemble the first 2 small hoses. There's only 2 small ones in there. So the male end, the female end of the hose is going to get a male quick disconnect coupling, and you want to make sure that you use thread tape on your fittings, and make sure that you get a good grip on both sides. I used a 7/8 wrench and a looks like a 14 millimeter for the smaller nut here, and then we just put some extra bite on it and got it tightened down as good as possible. You have to understand that anytime you have hydraulics with pressure, it says working pressure here is 3,000 psi. That is a whole lot of pressure, folks. You don't want to have these fittings coming off when you activate the pump on this thing. So make sure you get your fittings good and tight. And we're going to take these over to the unit itself. These actually go on the stands. So they're going to go on the nipple to the cylinders. And we'll get both those installed and show you. All right, so the directions call for taking this plug out here and installing the 90-degree elbow in this hole with the elbow facing up, so as to allow for room for the hose to be installed. What we couldn't understand and what's not in the directions is what is used to take this out. I took a pair of vice grips to the other one, but it turns out it's a number 6 Torx head screw that'll go in here, go in this hole. Unfortunately, my number 6, again, won't fit in there. So I'm just going to take another stab at it with the vice grips and just get a bite on the cap here and remove that, and then we'll install the elbows. But just so you know, when you're looking at this thing, the directions do not tell you how to remove that cap, nor does it really clearly state where that goes. We actually looked on the box at the picture and saw that that's where it was, so that's what we're going to do. Both caps removed. That's the cap right there that comes out. That's the factory plug, just to keep, obviously, whatever fluid's in there still in there. It wasn't under any pressure or anything, so just spin that out. Again, I used a pair of vice grips. If you got a number 6 that'll fit in there, then that'll work too. I just didn't have a short one, so whatever you can do. All right, when installed, I guess this nipple here should be facing front or up just slightly. It's just so that the hose can be accessed, and we're going to put the small hose, the other end of the small hose, opposite the quick disconnect fitting on here. And then that will give you the ability to run those hoses out to the main control unit. This nut here is the tightening nut on the elbow. It is an 11/16 nut, if you're wondering when you're installing. So tighten the elbow down as best you can, and then once it bottoms out, then just tighten this locking nut. I actually put a wrench on this side of the elbow to hold it kind of forward as I tighten this locking nut, just so it wouldn't go all the way back down. All right, with the thread tape installed on our elbow, we're just going to put our small hose on. I'm going to hand the camera off here so I can get a picture of it. Try not to get my hand in the way. All right. can't tell, but it looks like that. Where's the other hose? Okay. Yeah. You can turn the camera on. Okay, so this is the control unit again. I bought the standard power model 110. Plugs into any 110 socket. The controller, the up-down controller, pendant control, I think they call it again, is attached to this solenoid here. This is probably the raised lower solenoid. And here's your A and B ports for your hydraulic connections. We're going to put a couple of male connectors in there, and then we'll just hook a quick disconnect, male quick disconnect up to each one of these, and then our hoses, which are double female, will connect to this pump assembly, actually this valve on the pump assembly, and then once we get the hose hooked to that, then that will hook to the unit itself. Additionally, hydraulic tank. This is going to contain the hydraulic fluid. I have not checked that yet. I know it didn't come in the box, so either this tank is full or it's empty and I have to go buy hydraulic fluid. Not sure, didn't read that far in advance, so I'll need to figure that out. Power unit for the pump. Looks like a pretty substantial little pump. I've seen smaller, but this is probably going to give us plenty to lift this setup. All right, I determined that these unscrew. So all I did was take the O-ring out of the equation so I didn't mess it up, and I just unscrewed that. So flaw in the system, these had a cap on them that should have stayed on there as one piece, but they're cheap. You can tell these are just cheap little plastic caps, and they broke right off. So what I did was I stuck a pair of these pliers in here, and I just turned it a couple turns when I realized that it was actually in there with fittings. And as soon as my O-ring started to come out, I just took my finger and peeled back the O-ring, set it aside, and then I was able to unscrew this. Obviously, once you get enough of it out, it'll come right off. All right, so final assembly of the control unit is complete. You can see I have the two male quick disconnect fittings in ports A and B. We're ready to actually physically fill up the hydraulic tank. I did a quick inspection, and sure enough, it was empty. I didn't think they would ship it with anything in it. And they do not provide hydraulic fluid. So looks like the book says that you can use automatic transmission fluid, Dextron 3, 4, I think it gives you a bunch of different options you can use. I just happen to have 3 or 4 quarts of the Dextron automatic transmission fluid, so that's what I'm going to fill it up with, and then we're going to run a quick test on this thing, see if it works. All right, we've filled our tiny hydraulic tank here. It says in the book 2.5 quarts. It does say approximately. I didn't read that. I thought it was going to be exactly 2.5 quarts. I went ahead and was down to the last couple ounces, and all of a sudden it started coming out over the top. So yeah, approximately 2.5 quarts. I would slow down when you get closer to the half than I did, and have some rags ready because it just came gushing out over the top. Then I reinstalled the cap, and this one is with a manual type breather valve on the top. So what you're going to want to do is install the cap, get it nice and tight, and then loosen this breather valve to make sure that's loose during operation. It should only be closed when this system is not in operation. That way, when you're transporting it around, oil doesn't come out the... Okay, we're here at the business end of our jacks. This is the hydraulic cylinder here. This is our air cylinder. This is what we're going to fill with, it says exactly 50 psi of air. It also says to bleed it off first to make sure that there's no air left in it, and any extra oil that might drip out is fine. So that's what we're going to do next. We need to remove the little cap on the end there, and then I'm just going to use the end of this pressure tool to release any pressure off of it. I'm using this tire pressure gauge here. You can use probably any gauge. I have an actual gauge on my pressure fill valve here, but you know, I've used this a lot, and I really don't trust this particular gauge while you're filling, because you always seem to get a little extra leak off, bleed off from the air when you're filling the tires. So I always check it with a gauge afterwards. This probably isn't the best one in the world, but it works, and I think it'll give me do just fine for checking for the 50 psi. So that's what we're going to do next. Okay, I've removed the small cap covering the air cylinder here, and I just put my little tire pressure gauge in there, and it did bleed off a little bit of air. There's no more in there, so that's why you're not hearing anything. And so what we're going to want to do is connect this to this, and it says in the instruction manual that you want to have a good seal between these two, and if necessary use thread tape here. 60 psi was good enough, as you can see, to give me right at 50 psi on the valve stem. As soon as I took the measurement, I knew I was good. I've reinstalled the cap, and now I'll do the second one, and we should be ready to hook this thing up and make it go. There you have it. The unit is set up. Hydraulic hoses are connected. They are generously long. I assume that's to get them underneath even the larger vehicles. As you can see, they're both connected to our jacks. Air bottles have been filled, and now we're going to run a up test. There are a couple of other procedures that are listed in the book, including purging air from your cylinders. If I encounter a need for that, I will show that. But as far as the unboxing and setup is concerned, this is complete. And I'm going to go ahead and run it up and see if it works, and then finish this video. Okay, so after a little trial and error, I got the pump to work. It initially went up quite slowly. I think that was just because it needed to build pressure in the hoses, because you're running from a completely dry system to where, you know, you've got fluid going through the pump and then out the hoses into the cylinders themselves. Something I encountered almost immediately was the lower quick disconnect fitting was leaking where it mated with the male and female disconnect fitting itself. I couldn't figure out why. I spun it around. It still leaked. Still couldn't understand why. Took them both off, cleaned them, made sure that the system was purged first. Then I took them both off, cleaned the ends really good, and then just kind of worked each one of these disconnects back and forth to try to loosen it up a little bit. And then instead of hooking the leaking one up to the bottom, I hooked it up to the top and hooked the other one that wasn't leaking to the bottom. I don't know if that did anything, but long story short, I've activated it 3 or 4 times, and it no longer looks like it's leaking. I mean, I had a good-sized puddle underneath this, so I don't know what it was. I guess the fitting just, you know, first time on, whatever. I'm going to keep an eye on it. I'm going to go ahead and lift the system now while I've got it videoing, just to show you that it works and that it functions the way it's supposed to. So again, they give you this nice little up and down control pendant. Down basically turns that solenoid on the top to open, and it bleeds the hydraulic oil back into the tank from the cylinders. And obviously the cylinders will lower via gravity. So when you press the down button and you don't hear the motor running, that's why. It's just because the cylinder will click open like that, and anything left in the cylinders will purge back into the tank. That's the way the system works. Okay, so for the raise function, you just press the button. They come up slowly. Okay, I'm gonna stop it there. And again, I don't see any leaks. Nothing weird happening. No sounds weird. Nothing sounded weird before. And there's the jacks raised. They do raise quite nicely together. That's really nice. Okay, and they're coming up into the first lock position. These little legs here down there have a little lock on them, and as soon as it gets into lock position, you'll hear it kind of jump over the hump. I'll show you over here. It jumps over that. It's going to jump over that first hump. I don't have it completely there yet, so I'm going to bring it up a little farther. Okay, it's over the hump. Over the hump. Now, if you go down, just until it hits that, now they're locked. Okay? Sorry, you gotta go until, well, hell, I don't know. Guess I'm gonna have to read the book on that. So when I lower, they didn't lower equally, which is weird. But they did lower onto the locks, so they are frame locked. Apparently. So if I go up further, that's the second lock position. Okay, so they're completely up, completely raised. I'm still a little curious on the down now though, because these things have no weight on them. But I assume that they figured that into the manufacturing process. So with no weight, we'll go down. Yeah, it looks like they hit the stops. That's what happens. So under no load, even with load, I'm guessing that you raise them up just past the locking position, and then you hit the down button until they lock into place, and that's locked.